Well, Bill, we really appreciate you joining us to talk about ERP and RFPs. For those of you who don't know, Bill Davies is a BDR at Ellipse Solutions and heads up our public sector industry. Bill, I'll kind of let you do a little introduction of who you are, any fun facts that you want to share, that sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Savannah, and hey, Bobby. It's great to be with you guys. Like Savannah said, I've actually worked in public sector for more than 20 years. The last 10 or so focused on Microsoft products. I was at Microsoft for a little while, working in public sector before I came to Ellipse. So I'm very familiar with this topic, as you all probably well know. Most cities, counties, state agencies have to go through some kind of an RFP process when they're buying something above a certain dollar amount. And when you get to ERP, it's almost always a necessity for an RFP process. So I've seen this over the years in many different ways, shapes, and form. Bobby, I know you have as well.
Not quite 20 years, but enough to feel the pain, after one or two RFPs in the public sector. You get to kind of get a groove pretty quickly and try to figure out something more efficient, which is kind of what we'll be talking about.
Yeah. It is one of those things. I think a lot of people avoid public sector. A lot of salespeople avoid public sector for that very reason. A lot of people don't like to, get involved in complex proposals and writing, long documents. And so, so yeah, it takes a certain kind of person, I guess, to,
Yeah, I mean, we not on purpose, but you start setting up hurdle after hurdle. Like, well, we can't do it if it's this, and we can't do it if it's that, and boy, if it hits, and so you really start. Your box gets pretty small for what you can end up actually feeling comfortable bidding on because of the complexity. And so hopefully, public sector organizations and municipalities are trying to make this a little bit more simple so that they can get more of a broad reach and maybe a little bit better results.
yeah, yeah. And just to level set, we do see RFPs in commercial as well.
Yeah, of
So
course, yeah.
we respond to them fairly frequently. They're usually a little bit different in terms of the way they're constructed and a lot of the rules that surround what how it needs to flow. In public sector, there's a lot of you can't, a cone of silence. You can't speak to the organization while the RFP is live, whereas that tends to be a little bit more relaxed a lot of times in commercial. So,
Yep.
but it does exist.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys have kind of talked about how these RFPs get to be so long and so complex. Do you kind of see that's where people start to go wrong with them? Maybe they don't need to be that way, or what's some advice that you have to share there of what you've seen recently within that realm?
Uh, so for me, if you think about the evolution of the RFP, if you will. Many years ago, RFPs were generally much more simple, written by the organization themselves, the company or the public sector organization, and tended to be very kind of focused specifically on what their particular needs are. What's happened over the years is that a whole industry has been built up around consultants who come in and work with those organizations and help them to better construct the RFP. And of course, that's a good idea, but it's actually become problematic in that those consultants that come in to help write the RFPs have built up these templates, and those templates now have just exploded in terms of the overall amount of requirements that are needed to respond to. So now, often we'll get RFPs that might have two or even 3,000 individual line items in an Excel spreadsheet that have to be responded to. Is it out of the box? Does it require configuration, customization? If it does, why or how much effort is involved? And while it would seem that having very long lists of requirements would be a good thing, it's actually challenging. One of the challenges, I think, is what Bobby just alluded to. companies that are considering a response look at 3,000 line items of requirements and just don't have the bandwidth to respond to them. So it has followed an evolutionary path where now what we see are much longer documents with many more requirements, much more complexity. I was anecdotally, I was at Accenture for a while, and when these big consulting firms like Accenture would go to respond to a public RFP, we might have a team of 20 or 30 people involved in a response, which would literally be valued in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of how many consulting hours that were being used to respond to the RFP. So just taking on the response to an RFP, no guarantee of winning, just mounting a response and putting it back, for bid, can be a very expensive proposition. So there's a significant risk reward there that has to be considered. And that complexity, those longer RFPs just complicate the whole problem.
This goes back to why you put those guardrails in place, because you don't want to spend those billable dollars on something that you don't think that you're going to either have a chance at winning or doesn't meet the criteria you can support. I
Yeah,
mean, you're not wrong. The average is probably 2 to 3,000. I've seen some in the range of 7 and 8,000 requirements, and a lot of duplicate requirements and requirements that an organization wouldn't necessarily need. That's just causing bloat. So while to your point is great, yes, I think bringing some efficiency and having a starting point sometimes helps an organization where they don't know where to start. Like you're just saying, like, how do we even start? Cool, this consulting company's helping me. They've given me something, but it's grown into almost like too much of an easy pull for some of these companies where it's like, yeah, here's just like you said, the 6,000 template thing, just send it over. Don't customize it. Don't give it any thought. Just send it out in the world. And that I think is a mistake, and causes, likely you're missing out on probably some good responses in the mix that would give you a better end result for your RFP process.
right. Yeah, it's a great point. Most organizations have the need to replace an ERP one time in a person's career. If you work for a city, a county, or a company for 30 years, you might have one new ERP. So folks who are in that position aren't familiar with kind of what goes into procuring or purchasing an ERP or implementing an ERP system.
Hmm.
So from our standpoint, we do this all the time. We look at these RFPs all the time. The consultants look at them all the time. But from a business standpoint, an organization standpoint, they need help. And so there's good reason to work with consultants. But I love what you just said, it, just bringing a consultant in and trusting that they're just going to give you, the magic template, and that's going to somehow be the perfect solution. I think organizations need to take a close look at that.
You bet.
Yeah, it sounds like these people are kind of maybe putting too much detail into the RFPs and it's kind of being overloaded by a lot of information. Where do you see that AI can kind of help within that process, or maybe AI kind of hinders that process as well? Um, yeah, how does that look?
I think it's interesting. So I think AI has actually exacerbated the problem, and from both sides. So from the RFP creation side, those 8,000 requirements have probably grown with the use of AI, because if you stick them into an AI engine and say, hey, give me some requirements specific to our organization or help me tailor these, which ends up happening usually is there's more at the end of the day instead of less. I'm just speculating there, but it would seem that AI would create more proliferation. On the flip side, I think AI is going to result, or probably has resulted, in more companies responding to RFPs. So you can take an RFP now and stick it into ChatGPT or Cloud or whatever your favorite AI is, and ask it to write responses to questions, and it can do that. So where in the past you needed an army of consultants to respond to an RFP, that's actually becoming easier in terms of the process using AI, which means that organizations are going to get more responses, but those responses aren't necessarily going to be better either because, as we all know, AI has a habit of making things up, right? And so just giving it to AI and saying, how do you do this? Doesn't mean that the answer is going to actually meet the needs. So it's just, it's actually, kind of, in my opinion, it's just proliferating the noise and proliferating the complexity of the overall process.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think AI is what it is, and Bill's points are all valid. I'll, push back and pull forward a number of those points in that if you're an organization out there, and you're, even in the like the early planning stages, start getting company and organization data hygiene in place because that's going to make that process easier and more exact. So when you are turning to some type of tool to perhaps, layer in your exact needs, because that's really what we're talking about here. If you get an 8,000, point RFP, there's a lot of stuff there that doesn't apply to your organization or isn't dialed into your organization, has no relevance. And so that's just white noise. And so you can use this internal documentation to train on the AI and on this RFP to really get it down to what you want, which is going to make the entire process more effective. So as an organization, the sooner you start documenting and having a really clean set of organizational documents, that's going to make this process 100% better and more accurate to what you want for a result. If you're a company like Ellipse or another company out there reviewing these, yeah, you can't just turn this over to ChatGPT and have it answer questions and then send that off. That would be really foolish, because you are going to end up with some hallucinations, some things that aren't accurate. And then you're back to, well, if you have to have somebody review it that knows the answers anyway, you're probably not saving much time, maybe a little bit, but not. But you're going to have somebody come back and review it, and likely a team of people come back to review it. So there may be some cost savings, but more likely, there's better tools which I know people are using now, where you can really, again, fine tune your organization's responses to the questions you're getting, especially when they're templated. So if you've got these templates out there and it's almost always worded the same type of question, that you can then make an actual determination like, hey, this is a 99% match to this question. We have an answer, throw it in, but we're going to shade it yellow because we want to have somebody come back. And then you're looking at like a KPI, like, okay, now Bill and one other person can come back through and say, cool, I'm just looking at the yellows and it's like 14 lines as opposed to 8,000. And I tighten those up and I'm done. And then I feel really confident about the result. So I think AI's got great use. It needs a little bit of maturing, but I think it definitely is going to help the process, and it will. But again, I think there's key points you've got to get your organizational data clean on both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah, like Bobby said, you can't just throw something at AI and expect it to be giving you the perfect answer. You need some oversight and look through the what it's giving you and that sort of thing. It's good at doing and automating, those tedious tasks and looking through that huge document. But yeah, who's to say
Yep.
it's going to all be correct? So
Ask AI; it'll tell you the same. It'll
yeah.
tell you don't trust me. You need to do your homework and don't. Yeah, yeah,
Share a couple
yeah.
of times.
You bet.
You're so
Yeah,
smart.
it'll
You're
it'll
kidding me.
know. Yeah,
Yeah, it's self-aware, which is a good
100%.
thing. And that's what everyone needs to be. Um, So, yeah, like you kind of mentioned, AI is kind of good at generating those requirement lists, but that's not going to totally understand your whole business model or what you're looking for. Um, are there any other reasons that requirement lists don't necessarily work all the time?
Bobby, you want to jump on that one, or you want me to?
Yeah. Again, I think I'm gonna drill down and hammer home on if you're taking something out of the box and you're not doing the work ahead of time to really dial in your needs specifically. As an organization, you might spend again, I've been a part of an RFP process for for non-public sector. You get a committee of people together, subject matter experts and champions in your organization, or you build the people up, you pull people in to create them. They sit down, you start talking, you start figuring this out. we did it by scratch. And you talk about all the things that are important to your organization, and then you give that document over to make sure that that's being met. In a situation where you're getting a huge, requirement list with erroneous and kind of superfluous items that you're not even checking, that's just creating, again, a lot of things that a person has to go through, and there's fatigue there. And you do it once to get the RFP in place, and guess what? You're gonna have to do it again when you go to choose, and you're gonna have to do it a third time when you hire somebody, because they're not going to go by that RFP. By the way, they're going to create their own fit gap document, which we'll talk about a little bit here too. And that means you're going to have your third run through this process. So the tighter you get it in the first time, the smoother it is for everybody, and you don't end up with that team fatigue. Like, what do you mean I got to do this the third time? I just did this two times. What's going on? So the smaller you can get that list, the better. So you're not ending up, with this, three iterations of the work, being done, which is quite complex.
Yeah, I'll even take it one step further, Bobby. So so requirements are, can it do this? Can it collect an expense report? Uh, they don't always talk to how do you as an organization manage expense reporting. And there's a big difference in between can you do it and how do you actually do it in real life. And so you can write documentation around flowcharts and provide business documentation. It's very complicated and very expensive to go through all of your processes and write flowcharts and Visio diagrams. But at the end of the day, from an SI perspective, when we see a requirement like can your ERP handle expense reporting? Well, the answer is yes. How do we price implementing expense management? It's a completely different situation. So if the requirements are just saying, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And the answer is always yes. Sure, there's kind of a baseline for what that's going to cost to have to implement the basic functionality. But what if you have a specialized process where above a certain dollar amount, it has to go through two approval steps? And if it's international, it has to do something else. And if it's whatever, it has to be reported here, there, and the other place. So not knowing what all those process pieces are, the only way an SI can respond to an RFP is to put in what we call a contingency. Basically, we don't know what we don't know. We're
Hmm.
going to assume the worst case scenario because it's a firm fixed price. We have to stay within whatever the box is that we say the price is. The only way we can safely do that and protect our profitability is to put a margin on top of what our baseline understanding of that requirement is. And that's not good for the customer and it's not good for the SI either. It
You're going to end
potentially,
up going one way or the other. Either they're going to underprice it to win the bid, and you're screwed, or
yeah,
they're just going to overprice the price, and they're going to be priced out because, like you said, it's a contingency. I don't know. I don't have enough detail. Therefore, I've got to pad this by 15%, and then I
that's
end
right.
up
And
getting myself
there
out of the mix because of that.
100% right. And there are a range of SIs, of systems integrators out there who have very different behaviors where it comes to that. There are some who are very notorious for underbidding, making assumptions to say, we're going to assume the minimum, set of requirements, and
Right.
then we'll just do change
It
orders,
does
right?
expense
And
reporting. Boom. Of course it
yeah,
does. Out of the
sure
box,
it
no
is.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can, start it up
with
tomorrow, but
Excel.
it's not going to do what you want it to do.
That's
Which
right.
it's interesting, as we're sitting here, like, these RFPs could be almost as simple as, does it do expense reporting? Yes. Great. We need these extra three things. Does it do those? Yes. Cool. We're getting half. We've taken it down from 8,000 lines to like 100. Like,
Yeah.
because of course, I mean, this is where you would almost love to say, the person running this, your consultant's job, if you re-engineered it, is helping them understand, there is no modern system that does not do expense reporting. So we don't really need to, add a bunch of these, like, you know, basic generic things. We can just say, does it have an expense reporting module? Then it probably does this, like this subset, like of 100 things it's going to do. What are the 3 or 10 important things that you need it to do?
Yeah.
Or that you would like it to do that you can't do now, and those are the important things. And then you might call out that subset of, like, it's like, if you answer this one, then everything under it's cool. And
Yep.
then that might be a different way to look at it. Then you're really cutting your initial fit gap down or your initial RFP down to something really manageable that people are going to be like, oh yeah, boom.
Yep.
Because in most modern systems that you're seeing are going to do the base. Can it handle 20 characters for a an invoice account? Yes. Can it these kind of banal questions that you just keep seeing that are like, why? Why are we answering this? It's too easy.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
have to
That's
do it.
right.
I have to put an answer in, otherwise you will say, "Well, you didn't answer this one," or.
I think I think you're on the exact right track. If it in aligned to at least to what I think. I think the RFP should be about vetting the product and the implementer to a certain extent, but not locking them into a set of deliverables and expecting that you're going to get, a not to exceed price that's both good for you or the as a customer where you're going to get what you expect and not overpay because the SI didn't know what to bid.
Yep.
And there's another variable in this that you alluded to when you mentioned fit gap. For us, fit gap also means division of responsibilities or a RACI, if you want to think of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Implementing ERP is very customer intensive. The customer has to participate at a very high level. Project managers, maybe 15, 20 hours a week. Subject matter experts, maybe 10, 15 hours a week, depending on what stage of the project is. So you've got people who are in a warehouse or who are your controller or whoever who have full-time jobs working 40 or 50 hours a week already. Can they afford to put in another 10 or 15 hours a week for a year and a half that it's going to take to implement this ERP system? Because that's asking an awful lot. And if you are thinking about, all of the ramifications of that decision from a cost standpoint, the more the customer does, the lower the cost, but probably the longer it's going to take. But also, like from an attrition standpoint, if you ask somebody who's working 45 or 50 hours a week to put in 10 more hours a week, chances are that person may actually burn out before the ERP is ever implemented. So that whole conversation needs to be had before any kind of price tags or timelines or decisions about functionality are actually decided upon, because there's a trade-off between cost and time and these other ancillary impacts of these kinds of decisions. And so that by nature cannot happen during an RFP process. It has to happen in one-on-one conversations where you sit down in a room with the actual controller or the actual warehouse manager and you have this conversation. What is your skill set? What is your availability? How do you feel about this extra work? Does overtime make a difference for you? It's a whole conversation. So it's not as simple as just, does the system do this, but is the organization prepared for what it's going to take? And what are the decisions, the trade-offs that need to be made before the final scope of the project is set forth? Maybe you put some stuff off until later. Maybe
Yep.
you leave off this little nice to have module because it's going to take some extra time. And so that's invariably going to happen. But what the problem with the process now is, the RFP is written, a bunch of companies respond, there's some interviews and there's some demonstrations, and then there's a down select. And then negotiations happen. And typically during that negotiation phase, some of these decisions are made. A lot of them are postponed. A lot of it is glossed over. It depends on who your SI is. But you can get into a real bind because now by the time you've gotten to that point, you're kind of locked into whoever this organization is that you decide to work with. And I think there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like if you can offload some of that logistic on the front end to make it simpler, and then just keep ratcheting up the intensity and the detail as you go through the process. Like, hey, if you the initial process, yeah, we understand that we're going to be looking at 5 different systems, maybe SAP and whatever, and Infor and and Microsoft Dynamics. So we got people within those realms, and then you're looking at their responses to these key questions, and do we like the way they're responding? Do we like the way they're trending? Cool. Now that, like, the second thing, now out of the 30 people that that sent us RFPs. We're going to take these six and we want to bring them forward. And now you get the next level of detail. And then we want to hear from you on, one-on-one with some, with the team. And then again, just kind of bringing it all the way in slowly. So you're not burning your resources out, but you're getting the right partner at the end. I think if you do it a slightly different way and just kind of reverse that, because again, in my opinion is if you spend, weeks putting an RFP together, you're going to spend weeks then looking at the RFP because it's so complex, and then you're going to spend weeks redoing it all because the company you choose is going to want to do a fit gap, and it's going to be
Yeah.
the exact same process. So you're just redoing it.
It's
It's just running it over again and again.
It's the first step in any project is requirements gathering all over again. Basically, before you create design, you're
Yep.
going to go through some kind of discovery process and get the requirements together. So I agree with you. What if I was doing it, what I would want to do is first vet the product and the systems integrator for fit, not at the minutia level, but like at the competency level, at the how do you deliver your projects? What is your process? What is your experience? What do your references say? And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, once I get to a handful of companies that I'm comfortable with, and I would try to get it down to like three companies, then you want to do these much more extended, intensive interviews that we at Ellipse, we refer to it as a fit gap. And so just to give you some perspective, this is 100 to 200 hours of consulting time that takes place over 4 to 6 weeks. So it's not a trivial engagement. And we sit down and have conversations, deep, intensive dialogue with the end users to truly understand how they're going to use the system and how to best maximize the potential of the system. What's important is that you're also looking at the software itself to understand what it can and what it can't do. So that's the whole idea of a fit gap, right? Does it fit or is there a gap? And that may be different from Infor to Oracle to Dynamics to SAP to whatever. So,
And
so
between
having,
SI and SI solutions implementers, all look at this differently. Some are going to come in and they're going to do that. They have it dialed in. It's got a week's process where they don't do
yep,
as in depth. Some might go more in depth,
yep,
and every person will find their level what they're comfortable with. But being more in depth doesn't mean you're giving a better result. Being less in depth doesn't you got to find that level of comfort through this process,
yep.
and trust the person that you're talking to.
100%. So one of the side benefits of this whole methodology is you get to actually work with the other company for a month or two and
Hmm.
see. It's like dating. You wouldn't just go
Yeah,
get married, after
speed
having
dating.
exchanged some requirements. I need a three-bedroom house and I want to have two kids, and okay, perfect. Let's
Yeah,
go. Let's go to
yeah.
Vegas. No, you want to spend some time, right? Are they responsive? Are the people that you're working with able to communicate effectively? How do they handle conflict? Because you know what? Implementing an ERP is hard. There's going to
Mm.
be some very painful days that are going to come. Are they able to resolve that, or are you going to end up in a court of law trying to resolve through an arbiter, what your issues are?
Yeah.
So having that engagement and look, the SIs are going to expect that you pay for the engagement, right? Like I said, it's 100 or 200 consulting hours. It's a paid engagement, but that is a very firm fixed fee engagement. The consultant should be able to say, the SI should be able to say, hey, this is 100 hours, it's X dollars,
Yeah.
it's going to take 6 weeks. So that's the firm fixed fee. And coming out of that, you should have not just a set of requirements, but a close alignment to your actual business processes and understanding of who exactly is going to do the work, which will ultimately drive what the timeline is going to be and what the cost is going to be. And if you do it that way, I guarantee you at the end of the day, whoever you choose is going to give you a much better chance of actually getting what it is that you think you're going to get, as opposed to going the other way and having to have a bunch of change orders and, oh, I expected you knew this and I thought you were going to do that, and how could you not know that you also had to do this thing over here? All of the things that we see that happen with implementations that fail. And by the way, like two-thirds of all ERP implementations fail, and it's because the process that's being used to engage in those is not effective. It's broken.
Just it's not foundationally effective. Yep.
Yeah, I should have started with that, but
We got there.
And it's
Podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you.
it's not me. I'm not the one that's saying it. It's McKinsey. It's
Right.
Gartner.
This is more factual than it is just us, um,
100%. And
yeah,
it's all the things we've
theorizing.
been talking about. It's misalignment of expectations. So failure is not always catastrophic failure. It's not always we didn't get live. A lot of times it's, oh, it took twice as long as we thought it was going to take. We've been doing this for 3 years. Oh, it's 20% more than we thought it was going to be because all of these change orders came in. So
Or it's
you
turn and
can,
burn, implement and runs. Like
oh yeah,
you get the initial
worse.
one, and yeah, so you're insulating all that, those pieces within your RFP process. Hey, what happens after? Because we know a go live is not a date. A go live is just a milestone to the next phase. You mentioned earlier that you're going to have multiple phases in a project like this. Phase one is just getting the structure and the walls up, and phase two through X are putting the finishing touches and decorating. So you gotta make sure that's ironed out too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for us, best practice is phased implementation, like, as you're saying. But that's different from organization to organization. So certainly to be determined during that fit gap process
Yep.
to say, is this phase one? Is it critical? Can we push this off? Are there other considerations? So yeah, I think at the end of the day, AI is having a huge impact on all of this, and it's a good time to sit back, take a step back, and think about how to reorient the procurement process from an RFP standpoint to potentially get a better outcome by making sure that you're not just trying to choose, from a 3,000 question test who the best implementer is, but actually having some engagement with a company that you're going to spend maybe the next 10 years with, certainly the next couple of years,
Yeah.
probably a couple $1 million. So spend some money up front, go on a little date for a few months and make sure that, that everything is worked out before you actually, sign the contract and move on to that next
You
step.
bet. I have a quick question, Bill. What's
Yeah.
the current status of Microsoft's willingness to provide funds to help offset some of the costs for those engagements?
Yeah, they still have, I don't think they call it ESIF anymore. For a while, Microsoft called it End Customer Investment Funds, or ESIF. So, based on license revenue, Microsoft has historically and still is open to spending some money to help a customer do these kinds of evaluations, these early phase discoveries. So, definitely, from our perspective, if there's a fit gap and there's a cost associated with that, Microsoft will certainly offset some portion of that cost depending upon the size and the scope of the project.
It's good to know because it's also an easy process too. If it stayed similar, the customer just needs to say yes.
That's right.
The implementer is doing this for us, and Microsoft will pay the implementer directly, and then whatever, like you said, whatever. If there's overage, if it covers it, great. Like you said, if the license count is such that Microsoft says, yeah, we'll cover up to this, and that covers the engagement, great. Otherwise, you would bill for the rest. But still, it's something to think about. Another reason to engage in a different way in your RFP process, as opposed to like
Yep.
making it one solid. I gotta get all these RFP backs and pick a choice. It's like no, it's going phases. Once I get Bill's team in, we're going to do an RFP engagement. We'll have a separate piece for that, so that's going to cost us, but we can make that dollar amount kind of across the board once we've got our people in place.
Yeah, potentially easier for a commercial organization than public sector. I mean, just depending.
Yeah.
I'm not a procurement expert, and every city, county, and state has different rules that they have to follow, and some of them are very complicated. My thought here is just instead of forcing and so one alternative for public sector is to do it not to exceed
Mm.
type of a bid, recognizing that after a fit gap is finished, that the cost could very well go down significantly. So that the SI is going to knowingly build in that contingency that I mentioned earlier. They're going to put a margin on top of whatever the work is based on the requirements or whatever information they have at hand. But building that into your public sector process, knowing that at the end of the day, until you get through with that deep discovery process, that fit gap process, you won't know the actual cost. But I'll tell you, once you get through that process, then you can get very, very tight on the actual cost of the project. Our margin is less than 10% once we get done. Our margin for error, that is less
Yeah.
than 10%, once we get done with a fit gap. So because we are so confident in what the business is going to need to implement and to satisfy their needs after this long period of interaction, that we can make that assertion. We
What
don't
a
no
great
longer.
question to ask and add to your RFP. Like, what is your margin of error in in what you bid to what you come up with? That'd be a great, opening question in your interview process.
Sure.
If they
Yeah.
don't know, that's something. If they tell you a number that's outrageous, you're going to question. It's like when I get a bid for something, I like to look for the middle bid. Like you get people like, hey, I need to, replace some plumbing. I got, this person way up here at 10,000, this person down here at 1,000. I'm probably not taking either of those two. I'm probably going to be somewhere in the middle and find that person that is giving me a
Right.
fair shake. It's not one way or the other. So same thing. If you get somebody who's like, we don't know, then who that's a sign you might want to think about. Can you tell
Yeah.
us? You've done enough. You should be able to go tell us that pretty quickly. Or
Well,
if you quickly say, hey, we know it's 10%. Yeah, that's our
yeah.
solid. Yeah, and it's
It's
typically better, but
it's a
10% is what we say.
it's the point of having a conversation. The systems integrators should be very clear about how they go through the process, what variables are impacting their confidence level, and what amount of contingency they're putting on the process based upon the actual requirements that are being provided. The companies that have scruples and morals tend to put more contingency on it because they don't want to get into a situation where they have to overcharge or go beyond whatever that cap was, and or cut out some functionality. So they tend to include more and make more assumptions, whereas companies that potentially are just trying to win bids bid lower and just assume that it's going to be okay to make a change order and add some scope later on, and have these conversations with the customer that says, well, we didn't know you meant that, and whatever. Very uncomfortable situation to be in. So I think at the end of the day, again, having direct interaction between the customer and the systems integrator, and having these dialogues, these meetings, these face-to-face conversations is the best way to go before. And it's, I guess, part of this all, it comes down to the details of how it's done, and I think that high level vetting, putting things into the right context, and then going through the process that we've been talking about here is the best way to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, like you said before, implementing ERP is no easy task. And I love your your analogies of a marriage and implementing ERP because yeah, you are spending a lot of time with these folks. So putting in the work and kind of doing the research beforehand is definitely worthwhile. So is there anything else that we want to touch on before we kind of close things out? Like I said, I think you guys provided a lot of insight around this topic. So.
Oh, I covered a lot. I don't think anything to add. I mean, my number one takeaway would be to question, if you're hiring a consultant, question their process first and make sure that, you're getting the best possible RFP out there. So you want because you want to get good responses. And I'm telling you from the other side, you're losing out on a lot of good responses. So that's my number one thing is upfront, make sure you're putting down the easiest and most comprehensive RFP you can muster for the folks that are responding.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think we covered it pretty well, actually. I think vetting the company, and the product and the implementer, is important, and opening up the playing field, as Bobby just said, is to your benefit. So not over engineering an RFP and over complicating an RFP initially, and creating more of a process driven outcome where there's actual interaction that happens between your organization and several others. Now, the CFO might say, "Hey, that's we're going to pay three companies to do this evaluation, and we're going to spend 3 months." But like I said, this is a 10-year engagement for most
Yeah,
organizations, and probably even longer with cloud-based software. Now, you might be on
I
this
say,
software for 50 years.
yeah,
It's worth it to make the investment and go through the process.
you bet.
We're here. I'm here to answer any questions or to provide any information that we didn't cover. Thank you so much for asking me to join you guys.
Yeah, and of course, I should also mention that from a Doug standpoint, we're looking forward to keeping the Doug for Gov group going, and you're stepping into a role there. So looking for some exciting meetings upcoming here soon. If you're out there looking for how people are using the software, this is a great place to do it. Doug for Gov.
That's
Yeah.
a great point, Bobby. Thank you. Yeah, we when I was at Microsoft, I think it was during the time when Doug for Gov first got started up, and I wasn't one of the leaders, but I participated and attended a lot. And they're very informational. It's a great group, so
Hmm.
we're excited to start to schedule some meetings again and get things ramped up again. And you should see some communications if you haven't. Already registered for Doug for Gov. Yeah, like Doug, go to Doug, search Doug for Gov, and you'll
Yeah,
find
I'll
it.
drop
we'll
the link.
drop a link. Yeah, yeah. Savannah's good about that. We'll put a link in there so get directly to that website, and it's free sign up. So you just jump in, and then you'll get notified when these are all virtual meetings right now. So there'll be a virtual meeting for the most part that you can just jump in, and the topics have been great so far. A lot of ways people are using Dynamics and Microsoft in the public sector.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Like Bobby said, watch out for some messaging. We're going to be opening up a call for sessions sometime soon. So if anybody has any good insights that they want to share, that sort of thing, we'd be happy to have you. So exciting stuff. Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys both. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you, Bill. So I'll talk to you guys later.
okay.
Take care.